heading to an assignment where we realize Roman numerals and figures. So this is just a prep for that. We're going to talk about Roman numerals and figures and how they're actually very separate things that have been of late put together in the 20th century, really put together as one. So Roman numerals. We're used to these. We're used to writing the case of them and also choosing what numeral it is. So let's start with the numeral first. The 1 means, well, that we're dealing with scale degree 1 as root. So we put 1 there in that spot. And then because we know to build chords in thirds, third up makes the chordal third, another third up is the chordal fifth, we end up with 1, 3, and 5. That's scale degree. But what this tells us, the 1 means that the root is scale degree 1. And then it's the fact that it's uppercase can tell us the quality. So this, by looking at these scale degrees, we can't really tell if it's major or minor, but this tells us what the quality of that chord is, that it's a major. So if it were C major, I mean, if tonic were C, then it would be a C major chord, and we'd pick E here instead of E flat. So it's a handy system. It tells you quite a bit just from that. Here, of course, is our 5 chord. So the root is scale degree 5. And this 7 in here starts to bring in figures, but just to define what that 5, 7 is, we can give it in terms of scale degrees. Go from your root up a third and you get to scale degree 7. Go 1, 2, from 7, you go up a third and end up with scale degree 2. Go up another third, 2, 3, 4, and you've got scale degree 4. So that's how we can turn the symbol into scale degrees. That's going to be a really important skill to have later on. Okay, so the Roman numeral tells us that, because it's a 5, that it tells us that scale degree 5 is the root, and then its uppercase tells us the quality of that chord. And the 7th, when added, is going to be in a dominant 7th, it's going to be a minor 7th. So we get the quality and we get the scale degree on which it's built from the Roman numeral. That, I'm sure, is just review for everybody, so I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail. Figures, let's talk about those. Figures are these little symbols that follow. Some of them might be things like 6, 5 and 4, 2. And you also get crazy things like a 4, 3 suspension. Things that are not all chord tones. This is a suspension represented by that 4th. But all these symbols, these little numbers that go underneath a bass line in the Baroque, so a figured bass, there are all these numbers, the Arabic numbers that are underneath that bass line. Those are all called figures. They're a shorthand for intervals above the bass. So primarily, these numbers, a 6, a 5, as a figure means an interval above the bass, a 6th above the bass, a 5th above the bass. Now, we're not saying everything, and that's why we use this word shorthand in the definition here. We'll see that there are things that are assumed. So for instance, when you have just a root position chord, say it's this. So here's your bass note, G, and you write nothing under there, so that's blank. That's a shorthand for 5 and 3. Those are assumed. If you don't write anything and you're in the Baroque period, you're sitting at the keyboard, say, or playing on a lute, whatever, a chord instrument is under your fingers. You play a 5th and a 3rd above the bass in any octave that you like. You read from this note, the bass note, and the figures below, what kind of chord you want to build, what the composer wants you to build. Let's make this a 6-3. So the full thing would be to write 6-3, but instead we write just 6. Blank here for 5-3. The shorthand for 6-3 is just plain 6. Okay, so it's a shorthand for the intervals above the bass, and you need to know them well enough that you can supply what's missing. Supply the 5, the 3 here, supply the 3 there. Now let's talk about some 7th chords and what they mean if you look at figures. Okay, so here's a chord, and we tend to think of this as a G7 chord. And If we were in the key of C, we're comfortable with giving the Roman numerals and all that. But I'm going to isolate the I'm going to discard the Roman numeral and isolate the figure. Okay, so what you would be looking at, say, if you were playing, say, Messiah, and you were at the keyboard, at that time you'd be expected to know that a G in the bass with a 7 there would produce all that. That is a shorthand for 7, 5, 3. Intervals above the bass. There's my 3rd, and there's my 5th, and there is my 7th. We have whatever the key signature gives you, you just use that to produce the notes up above. Now, let's say we had a flat in the signature. We would have to say, now I don't want that to be a B flat, what my signature gives me. If I want that to be a B natural, I'm going to have to say so. Now, here again is the shorthand. I could do this, which is very explicit. That's fine. But it's also possible, and that's all the way spelled out, but it's also possible, I need to write the 7 or I'll get just a 5-3 chord. I can just write this, the natural, and the 3 is assumed. So that's part of the thing that you need to memorize. How does this shorthand work? If I see just an accidental, that accidental applies to the 3rd above the bass. Alright, so let me see, there was one other thing I wanted to show. That's it, yeah. You can draw a line through a number like that. That line through the 3 means find the 3rd above the bass and raise it. I'm not having to say natural or sharp or anything else. I can just write that line through it. Okay, so now, what do you do with this? Now remember, we're dealing with intervals above the bass. So we could say, what are all those intervals? Here's a 6th, here's a 5th, and there's a 3rd. And what we need is the shorthand for that. And the shorthand would be get rid of the 3 and just write 6, 5. My main point is, as long as you have this bass note, and you know what intervals are above the bass, you can specify what the chord is just by the intervals formed up above that bass note. So here, that 6 literally means I need a 6 above the bass and I need a 5th above the bass. I have no accidentals there to change whatever the signature gives me, so the signature gives me those notes. If I did want to make some kind of change, I would have to add the accidental or use the special slash symbol to make alteration to it. Okay, so look at the intervals above the bass here. Let me do this. I'll do the shorthand over here, and then we'll do longhand next to it. 6, 5, 3 would have been the complete set of numbers. The shorthand is 6, 5. Let's do the same with this one. So here we've got a 3rd above the bass, we've got a 4th, and we've got a 6th above the bass. Complete, then, to make all the intervals of the bass appear, we'd have to write 6, 4, 3. You notice how I'm writing those? You put the highest number on top and you descend. That's always true. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to use the shorthand right underneath the chord. So I need to get rid of the 6 and just write 4, 3. Now you can see a pattern emerge. You're always specifying where the dissonance is in the chord with your figures. So you've got a 6th above the bass, but you also have a 5th, and that creates that 2nd right there. That's the source of the dissonance in the chord, and that's what the figures reveal to you. There's the clash, those two intervals. Here the clash is there between the F and the G. That's the 3rd above the bass and the 4th, so you show that interval. Here the dissonance is because you've got a 7th above that bass note G, and that's what you show. Got to put my natural there. Okay, so one last one. You can see I've taken every inversion of G7. Here's the first inversion, second inversion, third inversion, but we don't even have to think about it that way. We can just say, what are the intervals above the bass? I'm going to start with the biggest one, the 6. There's a 4th. There's a 2nd. Here's our last one. Again, this is our G7 chord rearranged with F in the bass. again, I'll do it with the long hand first. 6, 4, 2, all intervals from the bass. The shorthand requires that we leave out the 6. Some people actually just write 2 for that, but the traditional is 4, 2. So I'm going to stick with that. It follows the pattern of these others where you have the dissonance highlighted. Here you've got 2 dissonances. Of course the 6 is constant, but the 4th, remember those are dissonant even if it were perfect. This is not a perfect 4th. It's actually the tritone. So that's a dissonance. The 2nd, of course, that's a dissonance as well. So both the dissonances are listed there for you. Notice how it descends. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 4, 2. We would think of this as root position, first inversion, second inversion, and third. The main point here is, though, that figures are intervals above the bass. Not every one, but key ones, because it's a shorthand. Okay.